Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. My name is Kyra, and in this video, I'm going to be sharing with you how I passed the NCLEX in 85 questions on my very first try. So I'm going to be sharing with you all my experience of studying for the NCLEX, how long it took me, the resources I used, how I studied, and give you guys some study tips and test taking tips for this exam. So first, how long did I study for? I studied for about 2 to 3 weeks for this exam. I did my pinning ceremony and graduation on May 4th and May 7th, and then I took my exam on June 2nd. So it was about a month in between, but I took a week or so off because I did get engaged that week. Like I said, I had pinning and graduation, so I just wanted to take my brain off of nursing school and just pretty much acknowledge the accomplishment that I finished nursing school, and then I was going to get into the swing of things of studying. So overall, I studied for about 2 to 3 weeks. Next, I'm going to talk about the resources I used. You do not necessarily need to use the same resources, but you do need to have the basics. So the resources I used were Mark Klemek lectures, simple nursing PDF that I found online, and I used the ATI books and the ATI questions online. So for you just need to make sure that you have some sort of way to review content in general. It could be any study books, any books that you use during school, ATI books, or even YouTube videos to go over content. And then you need to have some sort of question bank to do practice questions. You can use ATI, Archer, UWorld. I'm not sure if there are more out there, but you need a question bank. I personally just stuck to using ATI because I bought an ATI package during my nursing program. We had to use it for the whole duration of nursing school, and we paid over $600 for that. I did not want to spend any more money on any more question banks because I felt confident in my abilities. But if you want to use UWorld, Archer, etc., that is perfectly fine. You just need some sort of reputable question bank to be able to do practice questions. So for the Mark K lectures, some of you may have heard about this a lot. So many people who are taking the NCLEX or who have taken the NCLEX swear by the Mark K lectures. I really love them too, and I am a believer that that is the reason why I got a lot of questions right. I did not listen to the lectures though. I know my learning style and know that listening to an hour to 2 hour lecture when I only have 2 weeks to study for the exam was just not going to be beneficial for me. So I printed out the lectures and I read through the notes, annotated them, highlighted, put in little scribblies and pictures and different things like that to make the content work for me. So now on to specifically how I studied. What was my study plan? I did not have a study schedule. I just made a plan and I stuck to that plan and just kept repeating the steps over and over. So since I had about 2.5 weeks, like I said, 2 to 3 weeks, the first week I mostly devoted to just learning content and reviewing content. Before I started reviewing content though, I took a baseline exam on the ATI. I did a CAT readiness exam to see where I fell and to see what I needed to work on, what were my lowest scoring subjects, so that I could focus my content review mostly on that. So after I did the baseline exam, I did really good. I got a high chance of passing, but I still had some weak points that I wanted to go over. So I used my ATI books that were pretty small. I skimmed through some of them. The main ones that I had to skim through were mental health and some pharm, but I didn't even go really in depth with pharm, and I advise y'all not to go too in depth with pharm because it's too much drugs out there. There's only 85 to 150 questions they can ask you. They're not all going to be on pharm. So don't waste your time doing a ton of pharm. But mental health was something that I really wanted to study because there were a lot of disorders and drugs that I needed to make sure I knew for mental health. And then I did read through community leadership and fundamentals because those ATI books were super small, and I just thought might as well read them, get all the information I can since it's so small anyways, and it took me like a day to read each. So, and again, I don't read word for word. I'm skimming and making sure I'm pulling out important information. Do not read your textbooks word for word. Focus on your weak points and hammer those. So after I did the practice exam, I studied some weak points and did content review and read some of the ATI books. Then I did the Mark K lectures. I read through all of the Mark K lectures. I'm gonna leave some links down below. If you wanna find them as well, you can just look up Mark K lectures. Typically, you can add Reddit and you're gonna find it on a Reddit forum as well. But the Mark K lectures were so helpful. Some of those lectures I literally remembered during the exam because the question would ask something and I would think back to what I read on the lectures. Some of the really good ones are the lecture about OB and maternal newborn. If that was a struggle for you, it has a lot of great information on there. There was a lecture on fluids, electrolytes, acid bases. That one is really important. And then there is a lecture on prioritization. This one is super important. A lot of people said if you don't listen to all of the lectures, just listen to this one. Personally, I still didn't listen to it, but if you want to listen to any of them, that one is probably the one that you should listen to based on what I've heard. Not my experience, but what I've heard. Lecture 12 is very important because it teaches you so much about prioritization, keeping your patients safe, being minimally invasive, things like that. How to answer those types of specific questions, you will learn in lecture 12. Another good lecture from the Mark K was the one about pharmacology. It does not have all the drugs because it's not possible to review all the drugs again, but you need to learn certain classes of drugs and the really high yield drugs that are going to come up over and over. So I would definitely utilize those lectures. Honestly, just do all of them. It only took me, I think, 2 or 3 days to go through all of them, maybe just 2. I think I did half one day and half the next day. So definitely use the Mark K lectures and then do content review on subjects that you are weak in as well. So after the learning portion and content review, I did practice questions over and over and over. For the final 10 to 14 days, it was all practice questions. I did 50 to 150 practice questions in a day. I did not always do the 150 because that is a lot. I did 150 questions, probably 3 days out of the 2 weeks, because I wanted to make sure I still built up stamina to be able to answer 150 questions, even though I did not want to go to 150. And I didn't have to go to 150. I only went to 85 and it shut off. But you need to still practice going to 150 because you need to make sure that you're going to still be able to perform well if you see that your exam goes past 85. Don't practice for the 85. Practice for that 150 just in case. So like I said, I used the ATI question bank and I did 50 to 150 questions in a setting. And what I would do was I would put the questions in test mode so that I would not see the answers right afterwards. I wanted to do a full test and then afterwards see the percentage that I got. And my goal was to see that percentage going higher every time I was doing practice exams. And after I did those practice exams, I would take a good little break, and then I would review those questions. This is the most crucial step to your studying, and this is how you are going to be successful. We have the tendency sometimes to want to review things that we're really good at, but with this exam, you need to hammer your weak points. You're going to learn your weak points and be able to study those weak points by reviewing your questions in depth. Read all the rationales, whether you got the question right or whether you got the question wrong. Those rationales are going to help you understand how they wanted you to look at the question and how you need to answer the question better next time. And I say read the rationales for the questions you get right as well, because sometimes we use our test taking skills to get answers right, and that is okay. That is what we're taught to do. But if you read those rationales, you might understand why they got to that answer versus just using a skill and guessing and things like that. So it might help you answer the question based on content and knowledge in the future. Also, read all of the answer choices, the right ones and the wrong answer choices, because the wrong answer choice this time could be the right answer choice if the question was asked in another way the next time. So when I'm studying, I literally like to make fake questions that would apply to that wrong answer. I would say, well, if the question would have said this, then this answer would have been right. And if the question would have said this, then maybe D would have been right. This helps you expand your knowledge and your understanding of the subject so that you understand the subject as a whole and you're not just remembering an answer to one specific question. You're understanding the general concept and you're able to answer the question in multiple different ways. So overall, that is basically how I studied for this exam. I did a learning portion where I did lots of content review, read over the Mark K lectures, I wrote down notes periodically, not super in-depth notes, but basic notes. And then I did a practice portion where I did a lot of practice questions and review. And I would make sure I would review those subjects and review those topics really, really well. With the review section, I also use Simple Nursing PDF because Simple Nursing does put things in a pretty way that is aesthetic and colorful and has pictures and it has mnemonics and different things like that that helps you remember things. So this was another resource I used during the practice section because I did not want to keep referring to the ATI book. I was tired of that book. I was tired, but you still needed something to review with, so I used that. So now that I've told you about how I studied, I'm going to give you guys some more tips on how to study, make the studying process bearable, and then some test taking tips. Tip number 1 is to study in quiet locations that mimic the test environment. You want to make sure that you are focused and you can stay on task. I studied a lot at the library. I did go to the coffee shop sometimes because I do like a little bit of noise here and there, but I did go to the library a lot because that was a very quiet environment. And something about being around other people who are reading, being productive, working, helps me be productive as well. So that's a place that I would go to study. Tip number 2 is to take breaks when you study and then take whole day breaks from studying as well. So during my studying, I would usually do like an hour on, 10 minutes off, hour on, 10 minutes off. If I'm at the library, I usually do like an hour and then I would go outside and then walk for those 10 minutes, just leisurely walk, talk on the phone, things like that, and then get back to work. And that was really helpful to help me stay on task. When I was doing the practice questions, I tried to do the practice questions all together straight in a row. And then I would take kind of a long break, 20 to 30 minutes, and then come back and review all those practice questions. And then also take full day study breaks. Within the 3 weeks of me studying, I took at least 3 to 4 days off of studying completely because I could feel myself burning out. Doing these practice questions is a lot of work. Doing this content review is a lot of work because you're reviewing everything from nursing school. Literally every class you took over the span of your nursing program is on this exam. And it's really hard to stay focused without taking breaks. Tip number 3 is to take some small notes, but not too many notes when you're doing content review and practice questions. I like to take notes in a way that puts almost everything pertaining to a topic on one page because I like to see everything about that topic in front of me, like bam. So for mental health, there were just a few conditions and drugs that were tripping me up. So I made sure to have everything on this one page so I could see it as a reference and I could reference it before each of my study sessions and things like that. When you're doing rationales, I do not write my rationales down. I just did not have time for that. I worked the rationale in my head. I spoke to myself, said it out loud to try and get it in my head. But if it was something that I kept missing and I just didn't understand the topic in general, that is when I would write it down on the paper, which is why, for instance, I did the mental health on paper because I kept getting these questions wrong. I did not understand lithium toxicity for the longest. I kept getting it wrong. So I just wrote them all down and that really helped to get that solidified in my brain and to be able to have a visual to see it over and over because like I said, I'm also a visual learner who, when I write down my notes, I know where the answer is on that page. Even if I go away from it, I can remember the order I wrote it down, where I wrote it down, the color I wrote it in. So that's really helpful for me. Tips number 3 and 4 are some test taking tips. If you have standalone questions, you need to narrow those bad boys down to at least 2. You need to figure out a way to just cross out those things from your brain and say, this is not it, that is not it. It could be between these 2. And then you need to pick the safest choice, the least invasive choice, the choice that makes the most sense as a nurse, honestly. I felt like this exam was not incredibly difficult, but the questions were not as straightforward as the question banks were. I've heard this from all the question banks, people who used Archer, UWorld, and ATI, that the question banks feel more content-based, but when you take the actual exam, it just feels like theory or very convoluted questions. So you need to put your nursing cap on the best way you know how and think critically. That's the only way I can explain, is to think critically, narrow those choices down to two, pick between those two. And then if you have select all that apply, the SATA questions, you need to make sure that you're not putting anything down that you're unsure about. If you don't know it, don't put it down. You don't want to risk losing points because you're putting extra things that you're not sure about. And don't be afraid if sometimes there's only one clicked or two clicked. Sometimes that's just what it is, and you have to be okay with that. So trust yourself when you're answering these questions. Last and final tip is to be confident and speak positivity over yourself. I can't tell you how many times people would be psyching themselves out before this exam, and they were telling themselves, I don't think I'm gonna pass, I'm not ready. Honestly, y'all, this exam, you will never feel ready. You will never feel ready. I was scoring on my practice exams in the 60s and 70s. On the CAT exams, I got like a high 95% moderate difficulty, and then it went down to a 65% moderate difficulty, and then up to a 68 with moderate. I never got in the high. I was nervous. I was very, very nervous. I was like, do I really know this? Am I sure I know this? I passed nursing school. I have to know this. So you just have to speak positivity over yourself. Be positive and stay in a good mindset. Study hard so that you can feel a little bit more confident, but also don't stress yourself out if you feel like you don't know anything. Because walking into that test on test day, there were still drugs I did not know. There were still things I did not know. I studied how to use a cane. I studied how to use crutches, the 3-point, the 4-point, and it still felt like I did not know how to use crutches, honestly. But be okay with knowing that you can't know everything, but you know a lot. That's the goal, to know a lot, but understand that you don't have to know everything, and you will be okay. So that is the end of this video. I am so glad you guys watched. I hope this was helpful for you all. If you have any more questions, leave them down in the comment section below. Leave any more comments, anything you want to tell me, let me know. I just want to be a blessing to y'all, as YouTube has been a blessing to me in helping me on my nursing school journey, and I am paying it forward. So without further ado, happy NCLEX to all of you guys. You're going to do well, and you're going to pass in Jesus' name. I'll catch you guys in the next video. Bye.